Welcome to 246T Dino. Welcome back, I guess, because it's been a while. That's a steering rack. I'll explain about steering rack. The fundamentals made by Titan in the UK and machined to my drawing, my specs by the good folks at Universal Racing Services. On the car, the pinions offset 6mm to the left, which gives a little bit more room for the gear change, because the steering wheel goes that way too, and it means the steering column misses the brake pedal, handy. The reason it's got a spacer here is because I had to turn the whole thing upside down and back to front to suit their installation drawing, and I got it wrong. So that was fixed by taking 12mm off this end and adding 12mm that end, which moves it 6mm that way from centre, and that's good. The other slight issue we get is that the rack and the rack housing is slightly offset because they're all on maximum length, but we can accommodate that because it's got more than enough travel, and with different length rack stops it'll end up with the same lock either way, so that's all good. And in either end of the rack goes that, which is a little clevis. It starts off as just a clevis and 7/16 UNF bolt machined down to be flush. A little bit of weld there and there makes it look like that. Screws in the end and gives us a little bit of adjustment as well. And the big washer is for the rack stop to sit against. And that goes in the car, mounted on that thing, which is actually supposed to be in two pieces clamped together, but the young chap didn't quite read the drawing, so we left it in one, which is quicker and easier and cheaper, and just put a hacksaw cut through there so it'll clamp up very well. And also a little subtle thing, it's got a little groove down the back there, so that instead of sitting on the bolts, it sits on either side of the bracket, which stops it wobbling around with the steering load and breaking the bolts. Little Cosworth conrod feature. So I'll put that on the car and show you what it looks like. There's our steering rack in place on the front of the car. If you wander over here, you'll notice that clevis lines up with the axis of the rocker, and if the steering arm's the same length as the rocker and they're the same height, this end and this end, you'll have no bump steer, which is what we always aim for. Here's our little track rod, just a bit of 5/8 inch 4130 tube with a couple of threads in it and some flats filed on by hand to let a spanner go on there, and mean we can tighten it up nicely and loosen it. That goes in there. At this end we've got a 3/8 bore 7/16 high angularity joint. Expensive little unit, but they do a very special job. And that's in there. Which is now sort of like the original Ferrari. When we turn the steering column, it goes like that, like it's supposed to. Heaps of lock. So that'll all be fine come the day. Our next project, sitting here waiting for us, is attaching the engine to the back of the chassis. That's the back of the chassis, it's upside down. And that little bit of 2.5mm steel is the shear plate that attaches to the stressed sump, which we need to get straight or else the whole car will be crooked. So I've spent some time getting that in the right place, including the fact that the central hole is 6mm off to the right, which is obviously to the left right now. If that's not done right, the car will be very crooked, but I've checked it and rechecked it. Confident at this stage, so I'll weld that in. So that's now welded in place a bit. It'll get some more weld on it when I flip it over. But in case of a big accident, there'll be a big tug on that plate, and a little bit of 20mm tube's not going to like it very much, and it'll probably move. And obviously the floor is attached to it and should take all the shear load, but generally when you have a crash the floor comes undone, So I'm going to put a bit of 1.6mm steel right across there to support that plate, and also a nice big area to attach the floor to. Stand by. And there it is, mostly welded into place. Might be able to see the sheet's gone a bit buckled there, but I know a bloke who can sort that out. Chassis is now the right way up. I don't know if you can see down there, but that's the structural sump bolted in place on the back of the chassis. And fortunately everything misses, and as you can see, the engine lines up really nicely with the shape of the chassis, just fits in there beautifully. That's the bottom attached. Now we've got to see what needs to be done to attach the rest of it, because it will be structural, there'll be no frame around the engine. Moving along with our engine mounts, you can see the shear plate down there, which gives us good longitudinal and lateral location down at the bottom, but nothing torsional or vertical. So to achieve that, we put some more engine mounts in. It's already there in the back of the chassis, using our little plate, which will get thicker, and get a brace off the back of it from that thing. A little plate for mounting the water pump drive pulley, tension pulley. Put a piece in like that, some or other, and something in that bottom bush to hold it vertically. It'll give us longitudinal and vertical stiffness there. And up here we've got a thermostat housing, water inlet and outlet, which I'm sure the Suzuki guys never envisaged would be used as an engine mount, but here we go. We put a nice long stud in there and add a piece of chassis that's been missing until now. Closes the rear bulkhead with a hole in just the right place for a stud to go through. That'll give us a terrific upper engine mount once it's braced in from there and there. Hey presto. And over on this side, pretty much more of the same. We can't run a tube up from the bottom because there's a oil pump drive pulley in the way, but there's this funny cast iron bracket that used to mount a power steering pump or a air conditioning pump or something or other, which will tie into that nicely. Shame not to use it. Something like that, and pop another mount up the top. That'll be him tied in, and we'll have our engine well and truly constrained after about another 3 or 4 days fabrication work. Moving along, there's the beginnings of our left-hand front engine mount, which will have another bit up there in due course when we've got a mount in the chassis. And over there you can see the right-hand side version, which gives it some vertical and longitudinal stiffness. And on the water pump side of things, thermostat housing, I've made that long stud, this little spacer, which is a bit of tube with some ends welded into it. Could have been made of solid, but that'd be 4 times as heavy and therefore not acceptable. That goes on there. Here's the new back of the chassis with the tube welded through it, the top natural tube of the chassis, and a washer on there welded on to spread the load around when it all clamps up. If I can get this on with one hand, which I probably can't. Anyway, maybe I can. It gets welded in there and located there. And a couple of little braces for this little thing to stop it wobbling around, which will be done on the bench because we can take that whole lot off and do that in a more convenient location. And that's the front of the engine tied in. Shazam. Here's our little front top engine mount, let's call it that, off the thermostat housing, water in and out. That bit, you've seen it in the car already, but to stop it wobbling around, we're going to use a little bucket bush like that and like that, mounted on 2 of the other bolts, 2 of the other studs. Rather than obviously do it on the car, which would be awkward, I've bolted this thing to a bit of steel plate so we can have access to it on the bench. and a little bit of 5/8 tube like so, to stop it wobbling that way, and a bit of 5/8 tube like so to stop it wobbling that way, and we'll have it. No doubt with some welding distortion, but we'll deal with that in a minute. And there's our little engine mount welded together. It always looks pretty with the heat marks on it. And what I was saying about distortion, because each of these tubes will have got shorter in the welding process as the welds shrink, it'll be off center. But because it's a tripod, you can shorten each of these 3 legs with the oxy welder. What you do is heat, say if you want to shorten that and tip it back this way, heat it up red hot. It wants to get longer, it can't, so it yields and effectively compresses a bit. Then when it cools down it shrinks, which will pull it back that way, for instance, so I can fix it. And I'll trim the top off that bush to make it look a bit more cute, and I think that'll do the job admirably. Once again, here's our water outlet mounted top engine mount with the bucket bushes trimmed to make it look fancy. And I was talking about adjusting it with the oxy to take care of the welding distortion. Ended up with so much distortion, I put a 1.2mm washer here and here to make those things reach the mount they're supposed to, and it worked out quite nicely, so that all fitted straight back together. I've now put a bush in the chassis up here, and a bucket bush bolted to it to finish the left-hand engine mount with that bit of tube, which will hold it in place nicely. But trying to hold that in place with one hand and use the TIG welder is impossible, basically. If I had an extra arm, I might be able to do it. It'd still be a horrible job trying to get the torch and the filler rod in there and have my foot on the pedal of the welder and see what I was doing. So I'm going to use this mongrel thing down here, which I just use occasionally when you can't reach something. Little cheapo, I think it was $150 or something 10 years ago, 20 years ago. MIG welder, which I don't really like because it just sprays metal everywhere in a slightly uncontrolled fashion, but it does mean you can weld stuff with one hand. Just finishing up on engine mounts here. You're probably sick of me showing you that, but just to say that in the 21st century that would be hacked out of a solid lump of aluminium, but here we are, 1969. So the engine mounting points we've got in thus far are sufficient to hold an engine in a car, but not really sufficient to use it as a piece of chassis, because you get a big knock on the back. There's something there will break or bend. So to address that, the nice Mr. Suzuki's put some lugs on the side of the back of the cylinder head here for this little bracket, which is for lifting the engine up. Handy for me. They're not very big, so I've decided to use them both by putting that plate between them, a bit of 4mm aluminium plate, and a bucket bush, a bit of tube running off to a mount I prepared earlier that runs straight into the side of this tube right down the side of the chassis, so it's nice and stiff and strong. And then a bit of 7/8 tube, bucket bush. I actually made that bucket bush with a bit of tube and a bung in the end of it to save drilling out 50mm of steel. And the little bend on the end of that is something I tend to end up using on pretty much all my cars somewhere. That's the bend at the end of a pair of Victor lawnmower handlebars. Really nice 7/8 inch tubing with a nice, don't know why they put such nice bends in, a nice mandrel bend. Always seem to find a need to put them in somewhere, ever since I was 12. Anyway, there it is, tacked in place. And with something like that on the other side as well, it'll all be strong enough. Job done. And there's the right hand side, which is shorter because Mr. Suzuki logically put the engine lifting points on the front end of the engine on this side. So it's a straight tube without any bend in it, but otherwise the same. That's our engine adequately attached.